Ma'am Sandra Magsino and Ma'am Maxine Noreen Cabazon, and to my colleagues, my fellow librarians. Have a wonderful afternoon, and I hope that I will not stutter in front of you. Okay? Okay, so, 1, 2, 3, please. If you feel like you are sleepy listening to me, just try this acupressure that I have learned from way back in college that my biology professor has taught us. You should do this, your earlobes, you should stretch it downwards. Or you may touch the front and back or your palm with your index and your point finger. Rub this so that you will be more alert. And lastly, you can use your four fingers and massage the back of your knees. It is scientifically proven. There was a study conducted in University of Michigan, and this works. So okay, that's my tip, so that you won't be sleepy. Okay, so hi again. A pleasant afternoon to you all. I am Giselle Vigaviola, an electronic resources librarian at Cebu Normal University. Today, I'll be presenting my research that I had conducted entitled Disaster Risk Reduction Management Practices in Academic Libraries. Okay, so I have a tendency that paspasay kong gusto basa mo kulbaan. So you can tell me that paspasay ko, I should slow down my pace. Okay, so in November 8, 2013, it is resisted that disaster management and planning should be one of the most important aspects of library management. But in practice, it has been found to be a neglected field in librarianship. That is quoted by J.G. Smith in his research about disaster planning in libraries. Okay. In November 8, 2013, the Typhoon Haiyan made landfall in the Philippines as a Category 5 storm, thus making it the strongest storm in 2013 and the most powerful typhoons of all times. The typhoon's wrath affected more than 14 million people across 44 provinces in the Visayas group of islands, and major livelihoods were destroyed. So these were the pictures that I have gathered in Google about the Tacloban Yolanda wrath. And as we can see, there's a sign there, library. And as a librarian, how do you feel just by looking at these pictures? Like this. Now, when you see these pictures, what goes in your mind? And how do you feel just by looking at these pictures? Your precious collection are now laid in waste in your library. So look at those. And the question is your library ready? When you are questioned with that question, can you answer that question confidently? Okay, so now it is fair to wonder why I have chosen this particular topic to deal with. And here is the answer. First of all, it is undeniable that for years we have been experiencing disasters and catastrophes. We all have this assumption that a disaster will never happen. Or, if it will, the insurance will cover the cost with the damages to recover it. But these are dangerous assumptions, and the truth is, many people are taken by surprise when a disaster happens, and they just don't know how to handle the situation. Personally, I have experienced that, but fortunately, I did experience in our library. Are you familiar with the strong earthquake that hit Cebu in 2013? That was November, I think. Yeah.
October.
Fortunately, we were at home. October, yes. We were at home because it was a holiday, I think, ma'am. October 15. Yeah, but the late Mr. Pinsarga, our director for the UC Libraries, he was there in the library during that disaster when it occurred, and he told me that the building was cracking, the So it was a very, he was actually going up using the stairs as the earthquake was occurring. So thankfully, Jude, kita, wala yung users that tumatayo. Kaya I think the panic, yes, it was God's, kuan Jude, it was our guardian angels were there. Okay? So every time the question, is your library ready, pops in my mind personally, I couldn't straightly answer, yes, we are ready. Instead, I asked the question back, are we really ready? So, mag-conduct ng fire and earthquake drill, but, makasulti ka, it would have, if it will happen, magising-gising, maghapon gata, like we do in our fire and earthquake drills, di ba? So, I don't know, are we really ready? But, Griffith cited, and he equally argumented that disasters are often further worsened by human error and neglect, or even solely caused by such negligence. Overall, I can assume that we are liable for whatever happens in our library, sa atong staff, sa atong collection, primarily ang mga students, di ba? During and after the disaster, dili ingon nga kanang kita as a librarian una tag uli sa ato di ba? Kita dapat ang supervise because we are responsible in that area. It happened to us before the disaster happened, the earthquake. The student assistants, they jokingly said that we have this librarian daw nga, instead that she should have supervised, she went directly to her house daw and left the students there like what we will do with this earthquake and something. So I really think that librarians really need this disaster library planning so that we will also be aware and we should know how to handle when the situation will happen. Okay, so this was so disaster response and planning is very crucial in librarianship today. Librarians are the keeper of the most valuable collections, safeguard the safety of staff and patrons, and ultimately be there in the wake of disaster to provide services to those affected. Disaster management in libraries involves the development of a disaster plan, which can be described as a set of rehearsed actions which will be reduced the likelihood of a disaster occurring and further also reduce the extent of damage should a disaster occur. Another aspect is the development of recovery procedure that outlines the steps that should be followed to restore damaged items. That is according to Harvey in 1993. So there are 4 phases of disaster planning. The first one is the mitigation phase. It is the process where you should identify the risk in your buildings, the structures of your library, the evacuation area, and the emergency exits. So it is a constant act in use to lessen or eradicate risk to public and assets. Next is the preparedness phase, the formulation of a disaster plan and forming a disaster reaction team. Okay, so it is a state of readiness. Thus, the next is response. These are the steps that should be carried out before, during, and after a disaster impact. So these are measures to be taken to save lives. Then the last one is recovery. Re-establish normal working conditions and restoration of damaged materials and the like. Okay, so as one of the objectives of disaster planning that minimizes any damage placed to the collections, repair and recover any harmed collection, and para makakananing, they said that if ma-stricken atong library of disaster, as a librarian, we should continue our services ASAP. It doesn't mean like circulation of books. What they have meant is that we should at least help the people in the community. Okay, so next is, okay, there are two essential aims of disaster plans. McIntyre in 1988 quoted that prevention and preparedness should be two essential aims for disaster plans. Therefore, it is very important that disaster management should be a fundamental part of the library management function, and it should be equally important to execute it proficiently and quickly to minimize damage. Okay, so my study aimed to explore the current disaster risk reduction practices of the University of Cebu college libraries. The objectives are to determine the common practices of the institution on disaster risk reduction management. Second is to determine the common practices of the UC libraries on DRRM in terms of the library staff, the collection, the facilities, buildings, or the physical plant, and to find out the challenges encountered by the stakeholders during and after the implementation of the current DRR practices. Okay, in the first two objectives, I have used the survey questionnaire, and the last one, I have used an FJD to determine the challenges that they have encountered. So the main theory used is emergency management by Jensen in 2013. She said that it is the study of how humans and their institutions interact and cope with hazards, vulnerabilities, and resulting events, particularly through activities related to preparedness, response, recovery, and mitigation. Okay, so in my methodology of my study, I have used the purposive sampling technique, the focus group discussion, and I had formulated a questionnaire in a checklist form designed after the questionnaire I used in a study by Len Fellner in 2011. Results and discussions. Okay, this answers the question 1 or the objective 1 about the institution. All campuses have a disaster plan and are actively practicing earthquake and fire drills. So 50% of the librarians said they have practiced once and then twice a year. That's per year. Twice, 30% said twice. Then 20% said they have tried it thrice a year. In earthquake drill, 40% said they have practiced earthquake drill for once a year, then twice, 50%, then 1% of the population said thrice a year. Okay, and I have included this because this is the very least. Actually, there were a lot of data in this, numeric data, but it would be it's not really unimportant. It's not the highlight of this study. So I will just include them. Let's just say it got the lowest score in sa kanang service gani nga ganahan unta sila nga I mean a service that the institution itself could not provide. So financial assistance were the very least assistance they could provide after a disaster could strike. Okay, in terms of evacuation area, the physical facilities, and the emergency kits, they have quite decent percentage. Now, in campus libraries, the variables disaster plan, 50% of the librarians said they have not started yet, while 30% of them said it's in progress, then 20% of them said they had a disaster plan or they have completed it. Then in library staff and training, in medical or first aid skills, 20% of them said that they know it, they have that knowledge, they have the skills. In counseling skills, it quite have a huge score, with 50% of them said they could offer that service, counseling skills. Then 30% of them said others. Now, in recovery plans, 40% of the librarians said they have recovery plan for water damage. Well, 1% of them said they don't know. then 50% of them said they do not have a recovery plan for water damage. It's just same with fire and earthquake damage. They all got the same scores. Now, in results and discussions, majority doesn't have a library disaster plan. There were a lack of library staff trainings and disaster preparedness. Building hazards are present. Insufficient emergency kits and supplies. No official recovery plan and collections were at risk. Okay, then conclusions. Majority of the campus libraries haven't formulated a DRM plan, yet they have practiced the institution's disaster plan. It is very essential that libraries must have their own disaster plan and not just depend on the institution. Then they have emphasized this lack of emergency supplies, knowledge, skills, and trainings in disaster management. So they really wanted to be engaged more on emergency trainings. So my recommendations are develop policies for disaster management, conduct regular and intensive disaster drills, create more opportunities for library staff training, and if possible, librarians should be trained and workshops should be organized in the aspects of the disaster management and planning. Provide emergency supplies and kits within the library, and use social media tools to elevate awareness for what people can do to be prepared in crisis. So we are mostly on online world. So thank you for listening and have a wonderful afternoon, librarians.